The day I found a GPS tracker hidden under my truck was the day I realized the people closest to me were keeping secrets that could change everything I thought I knew about my family. At 68 years old, I believed I had already survived the hardest chapters of my life. I had buried my wife, learned how to live alone, and spent years rebuilding a quiet existence that felt peaceful enough. My biggest concern was usually whether my old back would cooperate long enough for me to finish whatever woodworking project was sitting in my garage. I never imagined that a simple Saturday morning would pull me into a situation that felt more like a crime thriller than real life. My name is Walter Brooks, and for most of my life I trusted my son without question. That trust started cracking on a chilly Friday afternoon in March. I was working in the shop behind my house, smoothing the edges of a handmade cabinet I had been building for nearly a month. The scent of fresh-cut oak filled the air while an old country song played softly through a dusty radio sitting on a shelf above my workbench. It was the kind of afternoon I enjoyed most. Quiet, predictable, peaceful. Then I heard tires crunching across the gravel driveway. When I looked through the workshop window, I saw my son, Ethan, climbing out of his SUV. At 35, Ethan was doing well for himself. He had a successful engineering career, a nice house, and a wife everyone seemed to adore. I had always been proud of him. Even after his mother passed away 7 years earlier, he stayed close and checked on me regularly. At least, that was what I believed. He walked toward the workshop with an unusual stiffness in his posture. His hands stayed buried inside the pockets of his sweatshirt, and he avoided eye contact when he stepped through the open doorway. "Dad, got a minute?" I set my tools down and smiled. "For you, always." Instead of smiling back, he shifted his weight nervously. "I was hoping I could take a look at your truck." The request seemed harmless enough. "Why?" He shrugged. "Mine has been making some strange noises lately. I figured I could compare a few things underneath yours." The explanation sounded reasonable, but something about the way he delivered it immediately bothered me. A father notices things other people miss. The hesitation, the forced casual tone, the fact that he seemed to rehearse every word before speaking it. Still, I handed him the garage keys. "Help yourself." He thanked me and headed outside. For the next 2 hours, I tried focusing on my project, but my attention kept drifting toward the driveway. Every time I looked outside, Ethan was underneath my truck. He barely touched the engine compartment. Instead, he spent most of his time near the rear frame and axle area. Then I looked closer. My pulse immediately sped up. It was a GPS tracking device. The unit was secured with a heavy magnetic mount and wrapped in weatherproof material. Whoever installed it had chosen a location where most people would never think to look. For several seconds I simply stared at it. A dozen explanations rushed through my mind. Then one memory pushed all the others aside. Ethan spending 2 hours underneath my truck. My own son. The realization hit me harder than I expected. I could have called him right then. I could have demanded answers. Instead, I sat back on my heels and forced myself to think. Life had taught me that people often reveal more when they believe they have gotten away with something. So I carefully removed the tracker and carried it inside. For nearly an hour, I sat alone at the kitchen table drinking coffee and staring through the window. Questions kept circling inside my head. Why would my son want to know everywhere I went? What was he looking for? And what could possibly be important enough to justify secretly tracking his own father? Then another idea occurred to me, one that made me uncomfortable but impossible to ignore. If somebody wanted information badly enough to plant a tracker, perhaps the smartest thing to do was discover where that information would lead. A few hours later, Ethan and his wife, Madison, arrived for their usual Saturday dinner visit. While they were distracted unloading groceries, I stepped outside. My heart pounded as I crouched beside Madison's vehicle. Within moments, the tracker had a new home. I returned to the kitchen before either of them noticed I had left. For the rest of the evening, I acted completely normal. Inside, however, I felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to see what appeared in the darkness below. I had no idea then that moving that tracker would uncover secrets far more frightening than anything I had imagined. And within days, it would lead me to a truth that connected my family to a man who was supposed to have died years earlier.